Sadists, cruel killers. Some of history's most heinous murderers were seemingly born to get sexual pleasure from inflicting pain and fear.
It was not enough just to murder. He had to torture, and he loved to terrorize.
It's beyond my control at the moment. I'm a homicidal maniac.
Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger has spent decades delving into the minds of murderers.
This type of total denigration of another human being is what is arousing for these individuals.
Serving detective Jackie Sabir is an expert in the mechanics of crime.
He drove with her remains in his vehicle down sort of the length of the country.
Between them, they're dissecting the case of a killer who some claim was sadism personified.
One gentleman woke up, blood pouring out of his back because she was cutting him with a knife.
She pulled the knife out and stabbed the knife into the floor and said, "I could just kill someone."
And investigating if they were born to join this most evil of clubs. British detective Jackie Sabir has worked on some of the UK's most high-profile homicide cases. She's travelled south to the town of Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, to the heart of the fens, a tranquil landscape that was once the unlikely starting point of a murder investigation.
So whilst the fens are only a 10-15-minute drive outside Peterborough, they couldn't be a more different environment. They're incredibly quiet and sparsely populated.
Local journalist Stephen Briggs knows the region well.
What's the area known for? I can see sort of lots of fields and agriculture.
Yeah, it's the fens, it's farming. That's what it's made its name for.
And what sort of, do we have levels of crime out here?
There's the odd bit of rural crime, but it's out in the sticks really, so it's not a crime hotspot.
But on the 30th of March 2013, the calm of the countryside was broken.
A dog walker was walking his dog along the track when he spotted a body in the ditch.
Was there any attempt to conceal the body, or?
No, not at all. The body was just left visible for all to see in the bottom of the ditch.
The cause of the deceased male's death would soon become apparent to police.
The body sustained a number of stab wounds, some of which were fatal, and he was killed, it would seem, in a pretty clinical fashion.
But the nature of the man's death was not the most striking element of the crime scene.
The body was found dressed in a black dress, black woman's dress, with knife marks cut into it.
The body was positioned face down. The buttocks were exposed and facing outwards.
So, for me, that's quite suggestive that it had been staged then, that it displayed it in a way.
Very much. I mean, we'd never seen or heard anything like it. It was a very undignified position to be left in. It would have to have been done very deliberately to be left in that position.
Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger has analysed the minds of the world's most dreadful serial killers. For him, the posing of a victim's body after death often reveals a twisted inner need.
Just consider, when you're taking the time to pose a victim, you're spending more time at the crime scene doing that. That increases your risk to be apprehended, which shows how important it is for the offender to behave in a ritualistic way. Killing is not psychosexually sufficient, and so they have to degrade them in some ritualistic or signature-like fashion.
I've always wanted to go to California, sun, the girls, the beaches.
During the late 70s, the Hillside Stranglers, Ken Bianchi and Angelo Bono, tortured and terrified at least 10 victims. The sadistic killers chose the epic Hollywood Hills as the setting for one of their deranged displays.
This is the location where Kimberly Martin was found.
They dumped her body down this big vacant hill and left her kind of spread eagle facing all of downtown Los Angeles.
There may be a secondary motive in trying to demonstrate how smart they are and trying to elude authorities and shock those who come upon them.
It just appeared that the killers were playing to the media. That body was, in my mind, a message that, hey, they termed us the hillside strangler, well, this is it. Here is a hillside strangler victim for you.
These guys are doing this for their own personal reasons, their own personal gratification and satisfaction. It means a great deal to them. The main purpose is their own sexual gratification. These are highly personalized events.
In 2013, the provocatively posed body of a cross-dressed male had been discovered in the Cambridgeshire fens. Detective Jackie Sabir is at the remote rural scene, analysing the mechanics of the case.
My opinion would be that actually if you've got a body here in a drainage ditch, this is a dump site rather than the murder site. Now here, the body was discovered with no wallet, no identifying features, so you will always start looking at the missing persons record. As soon as you identify who is down there, then you can start investigating their life and how they got there.
Police had already received a call.
A man had been reported missing the night before by his wife. And it was identified as a 48-year-old man called Kevin Lee.
The victim's lifestyle seemed to be at odds with the bizarre circumstances surrounding his death.
Kev was a normal man in Peterborough. He was a father of two, just a normal family man, nothing out of the ordinary about him.
Kevin Lee was a landlord. He had a number of addresses that he owned throughout Peterborough, houses of multi-occupancy that he let out to largely vulnerable people.
As police delved into the victim's history, the name of one tenant repeatedly came up on Kevin Lee's mobile phone records.
Police very quickly identified Joanna Dennehy of interest in this inquiry.
30-year-old Joanna Dennehy was known to have a close relationship with local criminal Gary Stretch.
Gary Stretch was a distinctive individual. He is over 7 feet tall.
He was known as a burglar and a petty thief.
He had been in and out of prison.
And the gigantic Gary Stretch also knew the countryside around where Kevin Lee's body had been dumped.
Gary Stretch had in fact lived in the fens. He was familiar with that area.
Although the clues were pointing to the imposing figure of Gary Stretch, the murder investigation would soon become centred around the diminutive Joanna Dennehy. Forensic psychologist Lou Schlesinger and serving detective Jackie Sabir are delving into one of the UK's most disturbing murder cases to try to decide whether its perpetrator was destined to join a diabolic group of serial killing sadists. In March 2013, the stabbed body of a cross-dressed man had been displayed in the Cambridgeshire fens.
It's incredibly unusual to find a body staged in such a way. It's really, really important to be open-minded when you approach something like that. We've got a guy in a sequin dress laying in a drainage ditch. So all sorts of things are going through your mind.
Identified as Peterborough landlord Kevin Lee, a breakthrough had been made. One of his tenants, Joanna Dennehy, and small-time criminal Gary Stretch had been linked to his mobile phone records, and police would discover that Dennehy's relationship with the victim went beyond the professional.
What is plain is that Kevin Lee and Joanna Dennehy began an affair.
Kevin seemed to just fall for anything that she said. Men fall for anything that she said. It always seemed to be with men she was able to draw them in.
Rather than paying him rent, 30-year-old Joanna Dennehy had been renovating one of Kevin Lee's rental properties in Peterborough. The flat in question came under the police's spotlight as they searched for further clues surrounding Kevin's death.
There had been considerable efforts made to clean up the address. Large sort of industrial-sized bottles of bleach were found.
But they were still able to recover blood spatter, I believe.
Well, they were. I think, as you know, Jackie, it's very difficult to get rid of blood completely.
DNA analysis would later match the blood with Kevin Lee, confirming that he had been stabbed to death in the property. But the results would ultimately reveal more. Tragically, another man's blood had been shed in the flat.
Was the blood spatter identified? Were they able to trace that back to someone?
Yeah, it was a Polish chap called Lukasz Slavosewski.
Lukasz Slavosewski was a young man in his 20s. He was Polish. He had come here as an economic migrant, working and beginning a life in this country.
And as with the murdered Kevin Lee, Lukasz was also connected to Joanna Dennehy.
And it was plain from a number of text messages that Mr. Slavosewski believed certainly that he had formed some sort of relationship with Joanna Dennehy.
And it would become clear that the perpetrator of both murders was not giant 7-foot-tall career criminal Gary Stretch, but Joanna Dennehy herself. Born in 1982, Joanna Dennehy grew up 70 miles south of Peterborough in the attractive commuter town of Harpenden.
Harpenden is very middle class, great reputation for schools, and it's very family orientated.
Jo Dennehy seemed to have a normal childhood, seemed to be doing very well at school.
Dennehy had a really good start to her life. She was in a stable family, she grew up in a lovely home, very privileged compared to some people's lifestyle.
Mum and Dad had very good jobs. I think she had, horse riding lessons as a child.
Just a traditional Middle England childhood, really.
But Joanna Dennehy would change.
When Joanne got to her teenage years, there was a marked deterioration in her behaviour.
She went off the rails, fell in with the wrong crowd at school. She drinks a lot of alcohol.
She was drunk at school on one of her exams and launched herself out of one of the school windows, and then her dad had to come up and bring her home.
She was always restless. She'd never just sit still. It's like she had to do something, whether it just be have a cigarette, you've put a cigarette out, just constant need of something.
Behind the scenes, the wild child also started to self-harm.
I caught her once in the bathroom with a razor, and it was just a tiny little slip. I did ask her why, and she said it was a release of some sort. I said, do you need to go to the doctors? I got the same old, no, I'm fine.
Professor Lou Schlesinger is an expert on the human mind. he has often observed psychological issues emerging during the susceptible teenage years.
In many cases, psychological problems and behavioral problems don't really emerge until adolescence. Dennehy has borderline personality traits. Many times a borderline patient will tell you, I don't feel anything internally. I don't feel anything. So they cut themselves repetitively because the pain of their self-cutting gives them some sense of feeling.
The adolescent years have marked a psychological change in many of history's most notorious and sadistic killers. Some remember the infamous Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, as a likable child.
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He would always have me laughing.
But as a teenager, Ramirez's life spiraled out of control. He would eventually revel in inflicting pain and fear on the residents of Los Angeles.
It was not enough just to murder or to rape. He had to torture, and he loved to terrorize.
These individuals are in their fantasy lives from early adolescence, and in some regards, their fantasy life is more real to them than reality.
Other killers' teenage years have been affected in other ways. In 1970, in Michigan, teenager Eileen Wuornos gave birth aged just 14.
That's when the kids said, look at her, she's already had a baby, she's a prostitute. Nobody should hang out with anybody like that. Didn't realize that she was raped.
Having given her baby up for adoption, from 15 years old, Eileen Wuornos hitchhiked and prostituted herself. Until one day, she cracked and became known as the Highway Killer.
She just simply pulled out her gun and pulled him off the road and killed him. 7 men in cold blood.
But Wuornos didn't appear to be driven by sadistic sexual thrills.
Wuornos was a prostitute and has been abused by men her entire life. And there was really no sexual motivation at all in her killing. It was basically just such anger that she built up over the years that she just wanted to kill men.
But what was driving Joanna Dennehy? On the 30th of March 2013, the body of Kevin Lee had been found in the Cambridgeshire fens, clothed in a sequined woman's dress and posed with buttocks bared. Blood analysis would confirm the landlord had been stabbed in a flat in Peterborough, and the property also contained the blood of Lucas Slabozewski, who was known to have been infatuated with Dennehy.
So Lucas's interpretation of their relationship was very different to that of Joanna Dennehy's.
Yes, I think he, as they say, may have had hopes for a relationship with her. I don't think she thought that at all.
When it came to men, Joanna Dennehy had a reputation.
A few of the guys that have slept with her, they all said, oh my God, in the morning they thought, what had they done? And she was very weird and there was that slight violent side. And a lot of them didn't feel very comfortable with it.
Dennehy would later be diagnosed with having a sadomasochistic sexual paraphilia.
One gentleman woke up, blood pouring out of his back because she was cutting him with a knife. And then the other gentleman who slept with her in the cemetery, he was quite ashamed.
On the 19th of March, 12 days before blood was discovered in the Peterborough flat, Joanna Dennehy sent a suggestive text to Lucas Slabozewski, promising him sex if he came round to the property.
She told him that she wanted to meet him. He was last seen on CCTV heading in that direction.
What actually happened to Lucas in the flat?
She stabbed him to death. She lured him to an address in Peterborough and he was stabbed to death by her. On all of the available evidence, it was clear that that night it was a planned killing.
And what followed was brazen.
Once she killed Lucas, she put his body into a wheelie bin, left in the street for a number of days.
Joanna Dennehy then demonstrated the control she had over her 7-foot companion, Gary Stretch.
Joanna Dennehy used him as a tool. Yeah, used him. It was if he's on an invisible leash.
Although only a small-time criminal, Stretch willingly covered up Dennehy's murder of Lucas Slabozetsky.
She obviously had Gary Stretch and she could call on to physically move the body and deposit it.
Gary Stretch would do as she asked, do it quite readily and happily.
As Joanna Dennehy developed a taste for blood, the master manipulator would soon be calling on her undertaker again. In March 2013, in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, 30-year-old Joanna Dennehy embarked on a campaign of murder. She had begun by luring Lucas Slabozetsky to a flat with the promise of sex. There she stabbed him to death.
Dennehy's got this ability, this innate ability to make men do what she wants them to do. She was able to control them, manipulate them, and ultimately put them in a position where she was able to kill them.
"16 years before enticing Lucas Slabozetsky to his death, Joanna Dennehy had captivated another man.
I loved her. I had 2 kids with her. I looked at her as the kids' mum.
The couple had first met during Dennehy's turbulent teenage years.
We were homeless because there was nowhere to go. To survive, you had to go and do what you had to do, which was basically go and rob something to eat, something like that. But I think I did it for survival. She did it because I think she enjoyed it.
The couple would eventually be rehoused, and aged just 17, Joanna Dennehy gave birth to the first of 2 children. But Dennehy's focus switched away from her family.
Her personality changed to a single vision, tunnel vision, which was alcohol. That was her personality. The violence, the pub, the drinking. Our relationship was her doing what she wanted, going where she wanted, for as long as she wanted. And she knew I was an easy target. She was in control of everything. I was a rug, a mat, whatever way you want to look at it.
Away from home, Dennehy developed a reputation for violence. One episode resulted in her being sectioned and diagnosed with a psychotic disorder.
If she was ever in the house, my door would be locked, the deadbolt would be on. I never felt comfortable with her around me because I did have this feeling that she could just jump out at any point and maybe try and attack me.
As her threatening behaviour escalated, one incident would prove too much to bear for her partner.
She turned up with needles in her arms to my house, sat down on the floor on the carpet and pinned herself against that door. And then pulled a knife out and stabbed the knife into the floor and said I could just kill someone. I was scared, really scared.
Around 2012, Dennehy served a series of short sentences in prison. On her release, she became a tenant of Peterborough landlord Kevin Lee. As well as becoming his lover, the increasingly aggressive Dennehy took on another role, collecting rent from Lee's tenants.
Dennehy started to work doing odd jobs, and that it did evolve into an enforcer type, making threats and things to collect the money that clients owed. She'd have a pretty fearsome reputation.
With impending renovation works, One property needed its tenants evicted, but 56-year-old resident John Chapman didn't approve of Dennehy's methods.
John Chapman certainly did not take to Joanna Dennehy at all. He didn't like her. He referred to her in fairly disparaging terms.
He was grieving, his wife had died. He wasn't coping very well with her death. And I know he was a bit of a drinker, but he was completely harmless.
He was a perfectly nice, affable man, but he'd fallen on hard times. Dennehy was making it a business to make life very difficult for him.
In the early hours of Good Friday, 10 days after she had murdered Lucas Slabozetsky, Joanna Dennehy entered John Chapman's bedsit and launched into a ferocious attack.
How did she actually kill him?
Well, again, stabbing. Just as Mr. Slabozetsky was.
This time, Dennehy inflicted multiple stab wounds, 1 to the neck and 5 to the heart and chest.
It was a frenzied attack with a knife, leaving blood everywhere in the room.
Did she have to incapacitate him or drug him? What were the mechanics of that offence?
Mr. Chapman had been drinking. He was an alcoholic, so he was vulnerable to that extent and may not have been in much of a position to fight back. And she was a very determined killer.
After the attack, Dennehy again phoned her partner in crime, the 7-foot-tall Gary Stretch.
The purpose of that telephone call was to tell Stretch that his services as an undertaker will be required again. She sang him a song. One of the lines was, "Oops, I've done it again." She had developed a taste for killing people. It's as simple as that.
Professor Lou Schlesinger has witnessed an apparent addiction to murder in many of history's most sadistic killers.
I know right from wrong as well as you do. I know you do. But there are certain times when it fuzzes out.
From the mid-90s in Baton Rouge, Sean Vincent Gillis's need to kill became all-consuming.
Sean Gillis certainly was highly sadistic, and he treated his victims in an extremely sadistic and very, very cruel way. And that behavior was highly eroticized for him.
At one point I could control it. It's beyond my control at the moment. I'm a homicidal maniac.
Right here is where my daddy used to live, and right over here is where he drowned Doreen. He said he just couldn't resist it.
During the 70s in South Carolina, diminutive killer Donald Pee Wee Gaskins claimed an uncontrollable lust for blood.
He said every so often he would get this urge that he would have to see blood. He called himself a vampire.
It's not necessarily that they want to see blood, it's that blood tells them that they're in control and that they have completely destroyed the person. Gaskins had a compulsive need to kill. He wanted to kill people, he wanted to destroy people, he wanted to see them suffer. And so there was a drive, there was a compulsive, repetitive aspect to his behavior.
He said he just couldn't be still, he would just tremble all over, and it would not stop until he killed somebody.
On the 29th of March 2013, in Peterborough, Joanna Dennehy had killed a second man, John Chapman. And that same day, she enticed her landlord and lover, Kevin Lee, to one of his rental properties, seemingly with the promise of a sado-masochistic sex game.
How did she lure him to the flat?
She told him that she'd put a dress on a bed and that she wanted him to put that dress on.
He told one of his friends he was going to the house to be raped by Joe Dennehy.
I mean, that's a very strong sexual message to be sending out. What does that suggest to you about their relationship?
I think Kev was obviously looking for something a bit different. He knew what he was coming for. It wasn't normal sex, as it were.
He plainly was attracted to her. She was obviously a very charismatic and a very manipulative woman.
For Kevin Lee, the rendezvous didn't end as promised.
Kevin Lee sustained a number of stab wounds. She was intent on killing him. That was her single-minded ambition. The body was driven into the fens by Joanna Dennehy, Gary Stretch, and disposed of.
But is there a connection between Dennehy's alleged sadomasochistic sexual desires and her crimes? To better understand the subject, Professor Lou Schlesinger is interviewing a professional dominant sadomasochist.
Do you think you could spot a man who would be interested in this type of thing?
Many times in my life, I have just had that gut instinct about somebody. They enter a room, and I can feel or smell a submissive that would want to play with me in a room.
And you could target that person quickly?
Yes, immediately. I mean, in a way, I really do believe that I'm born that way.
What are some of the things you do in one of your sessions, one of your dominatrix sessions? What exactly do you do to the person?
I enjoy heavy bondage. I like being with people who also enjoy a loss of physical control. Mm-hmm. I enjoy physical control, dominant submissive dynamics.
Mm-hmm. What else other than just bondage?
And I also enjoy sadomasochism. So that's the BD, the S, and the M. Bondage, domination, and sadomasochism.
Right.
Sadomasochistic play that I would personally prefer. I love face slapping. I love needles. And I love caning, sharp things.
Okay. How do you feel when you're dominating somebody?
It's an exhilarating feeling, a little bit like a high. Mm-hmm. A little bit tacky, sweaty, dilated pupils, mm-hmm. euphoric. I feel very, very strong, very, very controlled. It's just part of who I am. I just happen to be a dominant personality.
Do you feel you could lose control in an intense experience with someone?
Absolutely not.
You're in complete control of yourself at all times?
Yes.
Do you see how somebody might be able to lose control?
I would think that that would happen if a person is acting out because they have feelings and needs that they are maybe ashamed of.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
A lack of self-awareness, where a person starts to believe that they are bad, and that's where you would see a lack of control.
Because you know the case we're trying to understand a little bit better. Could you see how it would be easy for a woman to go from just dominating men to manipulating men, then to killing them?
I think the most relevant thing regarding this woman is that all of her activities seem to revolve around a shame base.
When we say shame, like she has feelings of shame inside, internal?
Well, like look at her choices. You know, she's selecting drugs, she's selecting alcohol.
Right.
She's selecting pornography. She's selecting what she perceives to be very negative things.
Could it be that she just wanted to kill people? Maybe out of anger?
I think that she was a perfect storm of events. She had a shame base to her because she was uncomfortable with her own natural proclivities. She had mental illness. She had substance abuse issues. Mm-hmm. So I really think you're talking about apples and oranges. I mean, that has nothing to do with sadomasochism.
Yeah.
Having gained an insight into dominant sex, Professor Schlesinger believes that Dennehy purely used it as a tool to control and compromise men.
The dominatrix teaches us that some people certainly have this need to dominate, but she is completely in control of herself and isn't going to kill anybody. Dennehy's different. Dennehy was using sex to manipulate men. Dennehy wasn't a dominatrix. Dennehy was a murderer.
In March 2013, in Peterborough, Joanna Dennehy had ended the life of a third man. All 3 victims had been dumped in the Cambridgeshire fens. When the humiliatingly posed body of Kevin Lee was discovered, Joanna Dennehy had already skipped town with her acquaintance, Gary Stretch.
This is the Fenlands here. Now we know that they travelled all of the way across the country. Over here, they committed a couple of robberies on the way.
But the pair also made some other stop-offs, allowing Dennehy to revel in her twisted achievements.
She's taken pictures of her posing with a knife.
I think she was just making a show for the camera. Look at me. I mean, she's a picture of her on the balcony with her top up. They just all seemed a bit staged to me.
As their road trip continued, an acquaintance of Gary Stretch, Mark Lloyd, would be picked up to deal with the stolen goods. But it would soon become clear that Dennehy viewed his role in a very different way.
Dennehy told me that I've killed 3 people, Mark, and I want to kill 9 because that's what Bonnie and Clyde did. That's history, Mark, and now you're going to do this for me.
In 2013, Joanna Dennehy was on the run, having stabbed 3 men to death in Cambridgeshire. Heading west, she and her accomplice, Gary Stretch, had picked up Mark Lloyd to shift some stolen goods. But as they entered the market town of Hereford, Dennehy was still intent on murdering men.
Excited, jumping up and down, just saying to Gary all the time, I want my fun, you need to find me someone. And by the time we got down here, Gary's gone, what'll he do? Joanne says, yep.
63-year-old Robin Barretza was out walking his dog.
She walked very calmly towards the bloke, said something about his dog. He dropped his defences for a second. There was a smile on his face, and then she just launched into it. Repeatedly stabbed him.
He attempted to defend himself by raising his arms. The attack was so violent that the blow actually broke a bone in his arm.
You've seen the film Psycho. It was she was all over him. It was horrible.
Gary Stretch seemed accepting of the brutality.
I remember saying, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not getting involved in this. And he's turned around. He's gripped my shoulder like that, and he said, Mark, there's nothing you can do, you have to let her do her thing.
Leaving Robin Barretza for dead, Dennehy rejoined her companions.
She's walked calmly back up here, got back in the car, leant over, kissed Gary on the cheek, and then we've continued down this road.
Superintendent Ivan Powell was on duty as news came in of the ferocious attack.
And of course, your first instinct is surely not in the day in Hereford, that doesn't happen. And by the time I'd got to the response officers, there'd been a second stabbing.
Just 10 minutes after her first sadistic assault, Dennehy would strike at another male.
I think I saw the dog walk along before Gary did, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she's now gonna do him.
Dennehy's latest target was 56-year-old John Rogers.
She's done exactly the same. She's gone out, walked up to him, said something to him because he definitely smiled, and then she just went absolutely ballistic. I mean, the first one was bad, but the second one, bang, 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 non-stop. It was all over within 3 minutes. But he must have been stabbed, I don't know, 30+ times, easily.
It's chilling, isn't it, that she jumped out the car, stabbed someone, leaves him for dead, comes here and does the other one. It's a real spree, it's an explosion of violence, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it has to be described as a frenzied attack. This is something of magnitude that I'd not experienced in my 33-year service.
Despite their horrific injuries, both victims would eventually survive Dennehy's vicious assaults. Fearing further violence, police surrounded the area, but it seemed Joanna Dennehy was not looking to evade capture.
They've surrounded us. She's calmly sat there. About 4 coppers have come up to her, just gently pulled her out. She didn't resist. And no bad language, very calm, very collected.
As Mark Lloyd observed her taken into custody, Joanna Dennehy appeared oblivious to the severity of her crimes.
She behaved as if she'd been caught shoplifting. Just so calm and flirting and no remorse.
Watching the CCTV footage of Joanna Dennehy behaving in almost a light-hearted fashion was kind of at odds with the serious nature of the crimes that she'd committed.
She did a bit of song and dance about singing in the rain, and that's the last I saw of her.
For Professor Lou Schlesinger, Dennehy's flamboyant display in the station reveals another part of her complex and deadly persona.
She's not psychotic. She can appear very, very pleasant. She doesn't appear dangerous. She's highly, highly manipulative and deceptive. She's emotionally void. So when she's in the police station, joking around, acting as if she's just paying a parking ticket, I think it's because she feels nothing. And she's not thinking about tomorrow and the consequences. It's all for today.
In February 2014, Dennehy was sentenced to a whole life term for murdering 3 men and attempting to murder 2. Her accomplice, Gary Stretch, was sentenced to a minimum term of 19 years. Although Joanna Dennehy has often been associated with a sadistic desire, Detective Jackie Sabir believes her MO reveals a complex offender.
She wasn't sadistic in how she killed. She was very straightforward and almost clinical in the use of stab wounds. For me, the sadism she exhibited was the luring of men in, the manipulation that she used of all the men around her, and the degrading way that she and Stretch staged Kevin Lee's body. That's sadistic in and of itself, I think.
Like many sadistic killers before her, Joanna Dennehy seemingly found a warped pleasure in pain. But was she born to join this most evil of clubs?
She does share some similarities superficially. She was very sadistic. She was very cruel, but it's different. This is not a routine case of an individual going out and killing people for sexual gratification. That is not Dennehy's case. I don't believe that this was a compulsion where she was driven to do it for sexual gratification. I think she liked doing it. It was enjoyable to her. This was an amusement to her. And in the process, just unloading a ton of hostility, hatred, and anger on people, particularly men. Females who kill multiple individuals in a serial fashion, like Dennehy, they are not fully understood. This is a very rare type of behavior. So there's aspects of this case that have to remain unknown or really not fully understood. In her case, it was more anger and tremendous rage. She went on a killing spree, and once she started, it was very hard for her to stop. She enjoyed it very, very much.